The Joe Rogan Experience.
It's the first time in history that you have Commander David Fravor, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, and then one whistleblower, a guy named David Grusch, who we can't validate what he said because it's all classified information. But Commander Fravor, friends of ours, Commander Fravor, he just told what happened to him. He chased a UFO. Then you've got Ryan Graves, who his whole squadron has been seeing these things. You've had both on your podcast. But Grusch stood up there, and he was very careful with his words, and I want people to know why. If you look at that setting, you're going to see right behind him was a guy named Chuck McCullough. Chuck McCullough is the former Intelligence Community Inspector General. So like the cops of the intelligence community. And he was right behind David Grusch, who is his client. So he's representing David Grusch because David Grusch put a whistleblower complaint. And look at those two handsome guys right there. So there's, this is the biggest conspiracy photo of all time. Can you imagine people seeing this and being like, what are those idiots doing up there with him? But so behind
Look at
David,
that dude with the beard and the glasses in the back. He looks so happy.
Yeah, dude.
Yes, UFOs.
People think that guy with the bald head is James Clapper. By the way, I got a bunch of
it wasn't.
I got a bunch of comments that Clapper was looking up my notes during that.
So
Who is that guy?
I don't know.
He's just part of Ryan's organization But here's the deal, man. This photo is kind of hilarious because George had ontological shock when we were in that room. It's like he's sitting there. He's sitting there seeing, after all this time, this shit's being said out loud. So what happened was the seats were kind of like designated for us because George and I were supposed to testify, by the way. But then common wisdom says, why have these journalist guys when you can hear directly from the firsthand people? And when we agreed.
Yeah.
But what we did was we put on congressional record statements, and people should read them if they haven't. They're on congressional record. I did an assessment of kind of the estimate of the situation on UFOs, but he named names and programs. But what you're seeing there is, and I kind of had to fight for this, is getting his lawyer behind him should be like an obvious fucking thing when a guy's going up to testify under oath in front of Congress. If you believe him, he's speaking under whistleblower protection. Dude, it was hard to get his lawyer behind him. I literally had to put the lawyer behind him. So we got the lawyer behind him so he could lean in and be like, careful, Dave, careful, which he did like a bunch of times. Mm-hmm. And then there's George looking all scrunched, and everybody's like, why Jeremy over there with no one next to him? I think people are a little afraid of me because, a little bit of a maniac sometimes. Whatever. We're there. Dave starts talking. They ask him questions. These weren't pre-scripted or anything. We're talking about what could be asked for sure, but they weren't pre-scripted. What Dave Grusch said, and correct me or add to if I get this wrong, Dave Grusch said, I did an investigation. It was my job. I was hired by, and this is a guy from the National Reconnaissance Office, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Like this guy he's been in the intelligence community a long time. And he sits there under oath and he says, I did an investigation. I interviewed, it was my job to look at over 2,000 special access programs, like black programs. And it was my job to find out if any of them had to do with UAP and if there's any money being hidden, like misappropriated, theft. And he's like, after interviewing 40 witnesses, I found a ton of shit that supports this. And in fact, he said, I found people who worked on the craft firsthand. And they had to come in, or they willingly came in. He called them hostile and non-hostile witnesses. And he's like, so I did that whole thing. The second I did that, which was my job, I was given the job, reprisals started happening to me. So he smartly did a whistleblower complaint through the Presidential Protection Act 19 or something. He got the head of the ICIG, the former head of the ICIG, who's a lawyer, and he says, fuck, dude, here's what I know. Here's what people don't know, is the ICIG, so the intelligence community, did their own investigation into David Grusch's witnesses and what he found. They interviewed like 40 plus under oath and immediately said, David Grusch's claim is both credible and urgent. So it's not like just one guy telling you. Our intelligence community did a deep dive investigation into what David Grusch told them under oath in the right secure settings, and they're like credible, urgent. So David Grusch can tell you the basic things that happened. But you know how he kept saying, in the appropriate environment, if you've got clearance, we can do that. I'm willing to give you a list of hostile and non-hostile people that worked on the craft. Biologicals, he even said. He's like, I'll give that to you today. We just got to get a skiff, and we got to make sure that you have access, you have clearance. And he was denied a skiff that day.
He's a credible guy. He's the real deal. I mean, he had a career in the Air Force, served in Afghanistan, a distinguished career. Then he goes into the intelligence community, working for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He was assigned by his boss to be the liaison to the UAP task force. That's what Congress had set it up to investigate the whole UFO matter before the current program existed. And the guy who was in charge of the task force, Jay Stratton, gave him a job. Go find the special access programs that are hiding UFO stuff, either siphoning millions of dollars, or they've got technology, crash retrievals, reverse engineering, all the stuff that we've always heard rumored, and he did. He found it. Most of the juiciest stuff that he found, he can't say in an unclassified setting. It has to be because they will get him. They will bust his ass if they can. They've already tried.
Like 4 times, and that's something offline we'll talk about. There have been attempts to get him silenced, unmuzzled, by the way, to not do podcasts or shows and stuff, right, to get him muzzled by people that are trying to say he's talking outside of his DOPSR, which is like what he's allowed to talk about. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for one word that he says that's outside of that. Like, I get asked by people in the government, has he ever told you the number of crashes? Has he ever told you locations? Like, I'm going to fucking answer you, first of all. Second of all, no, he hasn't. Because that would be illegal if it were to be true.
So he is authorized to talk about a very limited number of things. Is that correct?
And they're not vouching for their authenticity. DOPSR process, which is, I don't know what it stands for, but it's like a pre-pub process. He very smartly, because his lawyer is really smart, former ICIG, he's like, write it in what you want to talk about and see what they come back about what you can't talk about. So they're not saying what he's saying is true. They're just saying you can talk within these parameters. I would like to see if what he's saying is true. So we just need that option.
So who gives him the authority to talk about these things?
No one gives him the authority. He's taking that all on himself. He's a true whistleblower, whether you believe his claims or not. What he's doing is legal, but it's a career killer, right? DOPSR says they go through it and they make sure that things that are like highly sensitive are classified, right? Like you can't say this word or this program or this name. So they kind of do it as a pre-publication thing. That's the process. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I wrote a book with Colin Kelleher and Jim Lakatsky about the DIA's UFO program. It took DOPSR 14 months to approve our manuscript. So they take their time.
They take their time. But also when you